Killer J on the beat.
Come on in, come on in. I'll be with you shortly. Come on in. Welcome, 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 welcome. Good evening. Good to see you. Hope your family is well, your friends are well, that you're doing well. It is Thursday, January 6th, 2022. January 6th, 2022. I'm glad that you're joining me here on Beneath the Surface. Yes, Beneath the Surface podcast. The topic, the topic for tonight is the view looks different. The view looks different. Good to see you. I am streaming on Instagram as well, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So whichever platform you need to watch it on, we are all on all five platforms tonight. So for most of us, if not all of us, we had something happen last year that shocked the world. Um, and that was the Capitol storming on January 6th, 2021. And the reason I wanted to talk about this topic a little bit tonight is because it's been a year and we had time to reflect all the news article, all the news outlets, all the stories, who didn't do it, who did do it, who's to blame, who's not to blame. But it still happened. And if we look at this thing, when we look at what happened, the view looks different a year ago. The view of it, it looks different because of what happened and how it happened, what we got to see. And what we got to see, especially as black people or brown people, especially if you're black or brown, we got to see two different Americas in this country. On January 6th, 2021, we got to see people that said, quote unquote, they are using their patriotism to go storm the Capitol and stop an election. Now, they was trying to stop the vote of an election for Joe Biden, who was coming in to be the new president. You don't have to agree or disagree with the incoming president. But there are rules and regulations in our Constitution that state that we have to do this every time a new president is elected. Now, if you go back to 2016, when we had another presidential election, there was nothing fraud. There was no lies. There was nothing about it outside of the Russian scandal that we had. But I'm not getting into that. I really want to focus on the Capitol storming and why it's so significant in the eyes of black and brown people. As we sat here and we watched this, there's another date I want you to remember and think about and realize. October 16th, 1995. There was something that happened at the Capitol entitled The Million Man March. For some of y'all that don't know about the Million Man March, I'm going to help you and I'm going to explain what the Million Man March was. Minister Farrakhan, for some of you who know him or don't, he called on black men from the communities all across the U.S. to come together to D.C. to have a moment of togetherness, have a moment of unity, have a moment of collectiveness together, to work together, to go back to their communities and do what they said that they were going to do. And on that day, on October the 16th, 1995, but even before the Million Man March started, the National Guard was there weeks prior to the event. They didn't show up when the Million Men got there to march. They were there weeks prior to the event. Now, why is that so important to January 6th and the Capitol storming? And why are you bringing that up? Why are you using these two dates and what happened? Because both of them was at the Capitol building. One group was there to let their brothers know and their sister know. This is what we need to do in our communities. This is what we need to be doing. And then on January 6th of 2021, we got to see what privilege looks like. For most black and brown people, we already knew it was some privileges that we don't get. We knew that. But what we didn't need to see is it really happening. Let me say that again. We knew there are privileges that we as black and brown people do not get. But what we didn't need to see and what we got to see is that it's true. This is two different Americas. You have one America that will pull a black man out his car that he bought with his money, with the degree that he earned successfully, being a doctor, pulls him out his car and says, this is a stolen vehicle. And come to find out, that car is in his name. And then we live in an America where you can just be running down the street and you get shot for just running. And it takes days later for you to get the criminals. This is the America that we live in. This is the America that we talk about. So when you ask why are black and brown people so upset about January 6th, because the reality is, just like we know, if it would have been black folks trying to storm the Capitol, it would have never got to that point. Black folks wouldn't have made it inside the building. And you ask us why we upset. Why do we march? Why do we do these certain things? It's because of what we continue to see on a day-to-day basis. January 6, 2021 proved to us, showed us that what Chris Rock said is so true. What Chris Rock said in his comedy show, he said it in a comedy show, but I really want you to listen to people when they talk at a comedy show, because they really be speaking facts. He said, if it's white, it's all right. If it's white, it's all right. And I know for some people, why you got to bring up race? Why you got to talk about race? This is not the time to be talking about race. Why you got to? Because race is what I love to talk about. I'm a black man. I always have to deal with race as a black man. If you're black or brown, day in and day out, all of your life, you have to deal with the fact that you have to face race every day that you wake up. That's why I love that Chris Rock said, if it's white, it's all right. It was okay for them to storm the Capitol. Because guess what? The commander-in-chief told them to do it. The commander-in-chief told them, and his crew told them folks to go to the Capitol, go fight for your country. Now, let me set the record straight. They wasn't fighting for their country. They were not patriots. They were terrorists. That is what they were. They were terrorists. They were terrorists. If you look up the definition of a terrorist, that is what they were. They were trying to put the fear in politicians and in our congressmen and women, no matter what side you sit on, Democrat or Republican, because Democrats ain't right and Republicans ain't right. Independents ain't right. Whig party ain't right. Whatever party that you're part of, affiliated in. And that is why January 6th is so interesting, because they just didn't storm the Capitol because of what President Trump said. See, we want to put it on Trump. And yes, Trump has a lot to do with it. President Trump, former President Trump, has a lot to do with it. All the lies, all the false advertisements, all the false claims. But they got mad at a vote. I want you to pinpoint what they got mad at. They got mad at a vote. They got mad that the vote that they cast and the vote that other people cast all came out the same. No matter, it came out and it was counted. So now, instead of saying, oh, we're a year into this, and it's been a year, and yes, it has been a year since the Capitol storming. But I really want you to think about this vote piece and why they stormed. They stormed the Capitol because of the vote. They did not believe that the elections was actually correct. They didn't believe it. They did not storm the Capitol because their bills wasn't getting paid. They did not storm the Capitol because of COVID-19. They didn't storm the Capitol because of a shutdown. They stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021 because of a vote. Because of a vote. And that's why, for all my political science scholars, for all my criminal justice scholars, that's why we need to continue to push the importance of voting. We pick the sheriff, we pick the governor, we pick the city councilman. They were mad because of a vote. That's why they were mad. They were mad because of a vote. And then we go to October 16th, 1995, where 1 million men got together on the Capitol steps to have a charge for change, not only in the Black community, but in the communities that we serve. But the National Guard was called weeks in before the men got there on October 16th, 1995. But if you go look at January 6, 2021, I've watched both of them fully. It wasn't until hours after till the National Guard showed up to stop the Capitol storming. So you ask Black and brown people why we get upset. You ask Black and brown people why we continue to march and why we continue to say certain things, no justice, no peace. You ask why Black people continue and brown people continue to fight for the justices, that the injustice. You ask why we continue to fight for the injustice. It's because of what we got to see on January the 6th. That's why I need all my Black and brown people. I need you to go vote. I need y'all to keep them on the edge of voting. I need you to do that. Because it makes them nervous when it's a line of us out there. And we hear the vote and we have registered the vote and we've done our due diligence so that we can vote. January 6, 2021 was not only about President Trump and what he thought was a false election, what he thought about when he said the elections was fraud. It was not just about Donald Trump. It was about the vote and the fact that the people decided to vote for somebody different. Now, I know for my analysts, I've watched CNN, I watched Fox, I watched all the news outlets. And let me just be clear, some of them don't watch them. But there was one in particular that I was watching. There was one in particular, and he said something so profound, but it stood so true. He said they never would have stormed the Capitol if he would have won. If Donald Trump would have won the election, they never would have stormed the Capitol. It wasn't until Donald Trump lost the election. Now, I've been alive for plenty presidential elections during my 30 years of life. There was never a Capitol storming during the elections of Barack Obama. There was never a Capitol storming during the time of President Bush. There was never a Capitol storming during the time of President Clinton. There was never a Capitol storming during the time of Reagan. And I can keep going on, name president after president after president after election. But it wasn't till January 6, 2021, when folks decided to storm the Capitol because of a vote. We didn't hear them talk about a vote when Florida had to recount the elections. During that time, I think it was the 2004 or 2000 election when President Bush was going against Gore. Never did they storm the Capitol. Never did they say the elections was a fraud. They just let it happen. But we get to this date, and I'm going to keep going back to it. January 6th. We get to this date. And these folks decide to storm the Capitol. Now, let me just be real. For some of y'all, you done lost your job, done lost your careers, done lost your livelihood because you listened to somebody that kept telling you false information, that the election was rigged, that the election was fraud, when time and time again they had done research, they have done recounting, they have done more research and more recounting to prove the election was absolutely 1000% correct. And on this day, we still on January 6, 2022, we still have folks saying the election was a fraud. The election didn't really happen. We still have people to this day, a year after we got to see the Capitol storm. People died in the Capitol. We still got people saying it didn't really happen. It was Antifa. It was Black Lives Matter. First off, Black Lives Matter was not there. Let me just be clear. They was not out. They wasn't there. Antifa wasn't out there. Those were supporters of Donald J. Trump. And for some of y'all that don't like this podcast tonight, I don't really care. This is my show. This is my podcast, so I get to talk about what I want. But on this day, the view looks different to black and brown people because we knew something that we didn't have to see. We knew. We didn't have to see it. We know if we try to storm the Capitol, what's going to happen. We know. That's the biggest question that I get asked from black folks. What if it was us? What if it was brown people? It wouldn't have happened. Let me be clear. There wouldn't have been no storming of the Capitol if it was black and brown people. No storming of a Capitol if it was black and brown people. So when you ask, what if black and brown people, you ain't got to ask it no more because it never would happen. We could never get that close. The closest we got to the Capitol is the Million Man March. I'm just saying. The closest we got to the Capitol is the Million Man March that they did a few years back in 2013, 2014, when they reassembled at the Capitol to fight for gun laws and fight for the injustices of black lives and brown lives still being killed, unarmed black and brown men still getting killed. That is why they reassembled for the march, for the Million Man March. You ask black and brown people, why you get upset? Why are you hurt? Because historically, we know we live in two different Americas. Since the time we got off the boat, we've been living in two different Americas. Since Jim Crow, we have been living in two different Americas. World War II should have showed you that we live in two different Americas. You got the same country fighting for the same thing, but when black people come back, I'm talking about the Tuskegee Airmen. When the Tuskegee Airmen came back to this country, not another country, to this country, when they came back, they did not get their recognition till they were older. But World War II vet after World War II vet after World War II vet continue to get their medals of honor. And you ask us why we get upset, why we continue to march. Because we know the view of it is that we live in two different Americas. And that's the reality of it. We live in two different Americas. So here's your something to think about as I close out this podcast on January the 6th, 2022. The view looks different for black and brown people because the view never changed. The view just got wider. It looks different now because what we see, we knew. What we see is a reality. What we know is a reality. We know that you only like black, that some of y'all only like black and brown people when they're singing or playing a sport or entertaining you. We know that. We know that some of y'all only like black and brown people when they're your sales rep or when they're teaching in a classroom or when they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. You love black and brown people then. But what you don't love and what you don't speak about is when that black and brown person is laying on the ground, or when that black and brown person is fighting for voting rights, or when that black and brown person is fighting for education rights. We don't see you. And the people that we do see, we appreciate you. If you've been fighting this fight for injustice, we thank you. Keep fighting the good fight. We need you to fight. But on this day, on January 6th, 2022, we've realized the view looks different because we know that we live in two different Americas. The view looks different because you can no longer tell us that we don't live in two different Americas. We do. The view looks different because historically in this country, the view has always looked different because we've always lived in two different Americas. One America that's privileged and another America that got to fight and march and protest and get beat and get hanged and get shot and get hosed since they got here. That's why. That's why we do what we do. So you're something to think about. It's something that it says on my shirt, but it's so powerful. Use your power to empower. Use your power to empower. The president had the power, and he used it to empower people to go storm the Capitol. Let me say that again. He used his power to empower people to go storm the Capitol. We use our power to march for voting rights. We use our power to fight and to express to our communities what they need to do. And we still live in two different Americas. So when you ask, why we get upset, when you ask why we do what we do, why we march, why we say no justice, no peace, I want you to remember, always remember, never forget it. January 6th, 2021. Because we got to see that the view looks different. I thank you for joining me. I thank you for allowing me to express my feelings on today. Today is one of those days where you get to express yourself. Either you're happy or you're not happy. Either you're sad or you're not sad. But on today, I have to express myself and say what I saw on January 6th is what I always knew, is that we live in two different Americas. In one America, you can storm the Capitol. In another America, you have to march and fight and protest for everything that you get. But through it all, the view looks different. Thank you for your eyes. Thank you for your hearts. And thank you for your ears. Y'all, hope you have a good night. I hope your family, your friends, and your loved ones are well. Till we meet again, see you soon. God bless.